This is going to be a long interview, so if you're hot, I'm sorry. We'll pat the perspiration off in a while.
I'm okay right now.
Just for slate purposes, your name, how old you are, and how long you've lived in Petersburg.
Hermanze Edwin Fauntleroy Jr. I am 74 years old. I was born in Petersburg, and I've lived here all of my life except for military service and being away for other reasons.
And how long did you serve in the military?
I served about 2.5 years on active duty, but including reserve time, my total time was 30 years.
Okay. I want to start out. Tell me how it was growing up in Petersburg, in a small southern city.
Initially, I don't know that we were cognizant of really what the situation really was, except when we attempted to go into a location and were told that we couldn't come in. I think the most destructive situation as far as we were concerned really was in the educational area. I attended and graduated from Peabody High School. And after a point, we learned that Petersburg High School had what we believed to be some very critical and important subjects that we didn't have. Physics, as an example. I didn't see any physics until I was enrolled in Virginia State College at that time. I recall one other, I think, very important situation, and was that Petersburg High School had a distributive education program. Peabody had something, but it wasn't that. Okay. And the problem was that when students from Peabody attempted to get summer jobs, particularly in the retail area, they normally were told that the store personnel didn't have time to train them. And yet the Petersburg High School students were able to get jobs, to be employed without having to even be concerned about that. And we ultimately learned that the fact that they were exposed to the distributive education program and talked much about retailing and how to handle customers and handling different types of equipment, cash registers, etc., allowed them to walk right into the job for that period of time. And we couldn't do that. So there were those kinds of differences that began to impact us when we discovered that they really existed.
Hey, hold a minute. Is this audio okay? Is he talking?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
I want to go back before we move up the chain and explore the difference in education.
Mm-hmm.
You hit on the fact that you realized there was a difference when you tried to go into locations, maybe different businesses or whatever. Expand on that a bit. When do you remember as a child when you realized there was a difference on how black and whites were treated and lived in Petersburg?
I think it happened mostly when we attempted to enter restaurants, the theaters. One situation specifically was restroom facilities. And that was a real significantly disheartening situation because the doors were labeled. and you had colored entrances, and you had white entrances. You had colored ladies and white ladies. And that in itself really was degrading. The water fountain, which was sitting just outside the restroom area, there were two of them. One was labeled colored and one was labeled white. And we weren't supposed to drink from the white water fountain, even though I found out the water was the same. Those types of situations where we attempted to use facilities that were segregated to the extent that in some situations we really weren't even permitted to come in if you attempted to go in, and you would be stopped at the door, as an example. I remember going to a Canton restaurant on Sycamore Street, another young man and I, and we went in and we sat down, but we were immediately approached and told that they could not serve us. And of course we had some brief discussion in terms of why. And the answer basically was that we were black and they didn't serve blacks. And we were asked to leave.
What did you feel like at that moment? Do you remember your feelings?
Again, I think it was a very, very degrading type of situation in terms of seeing other people sitting there eating, and we were being told that we couldn't eat the same food. And to some degree, it was difficult to understand why. But the fact that we were told we couldn't do it was very significant in terms of how it caused us to feel like nothing, really.
That's exactly where I was going. What if you keep hearing that you're not as good as someone else? What does that do to someone mentally?
I think it really begins to cause you to think, or at least begin to, in quotes, wonder, what's the difference? We're all human beings, and at the same time, we were being told that we weren't the same, and we could not do what other people were doing. We never could really understand, I think, when we were growing up, why that situation existed. And as a result of that, again, I think it caused us to feel degraded. It caused us to feel little. Why is this? Why are we being treated like this? And again, you see what's going on, and yet you're being told, no, you can't be served here.
Do you remember either one of your parents that you would have family discussions about this, about the situation of how you were being treated?
Yes. I think the situation at home, though, was such that when we talked about it, we were sort of encouraged not to push it. And it was indicated, I think, in the course of the conversation that it would be better if we went to school and did what we knew we could do without raising questions that might cause some problem in terms of the owners or people in charge might consider that we were being arrogant.
What did your parents do for a living?
My father taught at Virginia State College for 47 years. My mother also taught, but she didn't teach for any great length of time. I think maybe after I was born, she decided to stay home. But she still substituted, and she was obviously eligible to be a teacher. But my father continuously taught.
What did he teach?
He was in the industrial education area. And at that time, of course, that included a number of other subjects that were related to some degree, to the business area and how to work with people. So with that in mind, he had to really, and other teachers in that area had to be sure that the students were exposed as much as possible to what should be the business life once you left college, even though when you got out there you found that it was a little bit different.
What do you think your parents feared retribution?
Retribution in the sense that I think they were more concerned about me and other parents concerned about their children and not wanting us to do something that would get us involved. And at that time, if we pushed to get something done, going into a restaurant and just refusing to move, might cause us to be arrested. And this was even before the open civil rights area. But I think for the most part, that's what they were concerned about, that we would get into trouble.
Let's move. Where did you go to elementary school?
Giles B. Cook, which is really directly behind the old Peabody High School building. And that was my first school. In fact, it's still standing.
And did you go from elementary straight to high school?
No, we went into what was called a junior high school situation, but it really wasn't. We attended, when we left Giles B. Cook Elementary, we attended what was the 5H or 5 High class. And then we went to the 6th grade. We went to the 7th grade. And then from the 7th grade, we went directly into high school for 4 years, which in fact meant that we only received 4 years, or a total of 11 years in terms of our public education. And we learned, of course, that Petersburg High School had a 12th grade. And that just, again, caused us to just try to determine, why. What is it that makes us so different that we can't have the same situation and be exposed to the same educational program, if you will. Bowling Junior High School on Fillmore Street was, in fact, a junior high school. And we didn't have that interim period between the elementary school program and the actual senior high school program. So we missed that part of the schooling, if you will.
Let's pick up with when you went in the Army, how you went in as an officer. I want you to tell me this on camera. And when you went in, how it was the same, that you were treated the same, but how you were also treated differently. Meaning, okay, the Army was past the point of that I guess you didn't have separate water fountains, you didn't eat separately, you all lived together. So we'll pick up from that point of how you went into the military.
Well, I was commissioned in 1953, and then I still had a year to go. So I stayed and completed my educational work and graduated. And then, of course, I had been ordered to go on active duty. Even though the situation was beginning to change and to a great degree had changed depending on where you were, one of the problems that we had, I think, as black officers was that when you were rated, and that had to take place periodically in receiving an efficiency report, you could tell, depending on who your rater was, you could tell that some of that feeling, if you will, on the part of that person was still there, and that it was being injected into your rating. The situation, of course, was one that you could sit and talk to your rater, but for the most part, it wasn't much you could do to cause it to be changed. Then in some cases, of course, you really did have a person who was very objective and did what he was supposed to do in terms of using the proper procedures to determine whether or not you were doing your job or not. So there was some of that. In fact, when I was in Korea, my immediate supervisor, the person who had to rate me, told me one day that he said, "You know, Hermanze, you're going to have to do more than anybody else here." I was the only black officer in that whole section. You've got to remember that you need to do that. You know. Ultimately, he really tried to, when he had to rate me, he really tried to create some problems for me. And in fact, I had to go to the IG, or the Inspector General, to make an effort to get that resolved, because I knew that this wasn't because of my performance one way or the other. So I did that. I did report that, and I guess about 2.5 months after I did that, I was shipped out again. And fortunately, when it was about time for me to come home. I had about 3 or 4 months left, and they still moved me from where I was, you know. And it was because of that efficiency report. But fortunately, I was sent to a unit where the situation was better. The commanding officer was a completely different person, really. And I don't think it just happened. I think it was a part of him, and he had, you know, come out of a situation in his civilian life where apparently he was involved in situations where people were different, and you know, and he was following that line, if you will. So for that period of time, of course, the whole situation was considerably better. You know.
Now, let me ask you, what was it like living predominantly, that you had very little contacts with whites because you were told you couldn't eat with whites, you couldn't drink the water. And then you went into the military and you're all as one. You ate together. I guess you slept together in the same barracks. What was going through your head then?
I guess you were trying to determine what the difference is. What is the difference here? Even though or you knew at that time that the president of the United States had said, that's it. This whole segregation bit's got to stop, and the armed forces will, from this day forward, be integrated. So when something did happen, like the situation I just described, you knew that there was something else there that was causing that to happen. And in view of that, you still had to be on your toes, so to speak, to be sure that you did whatever it was that your assignment was, and that you would be able to back up the situation if you needed to, like I was describing what I had to do. But ultimately, I think I began to see that people began to accept the president's order and began to do what they were supposed to do. Because it got to the point where if they didn't, then they were going to be in trouble. So the situation began to change. You would still have some of it, but you could tell that it was changing.
Could you feel resentment? You were an officer of white soldiers that you had command over?
Very, very little. Very little. The assignments that I had were such that, I was able to work with the people that I was responsible for. And fortunately, I didn't have any serious problems in terms of them doing whatever it was that I had indicated to them needed to be done. So there were, I can recall a couple of soldiers who didn't like me being their commander. And I could tell, from time to time that they were trying to fight whatever it was that they were supposed to be doing, and maybe doing a little something here and there that would affect me. But the situations that I had, really for the most part, the enlisted persons began to accept it, really. Accept the change. And it worked itself out.
When you went overseas, were you aware that they lived differently as far as there was no discrimination?
The location where I was overseas.
Well, I know that. Yeah, when you went to Korea.
Yeah.
Did you go over to any of European countries?
No. Mm-mm.
But was it different being out of this country?
Yeah, it was different. I did spend a very short period of time in Japan, but for the most part in Korea, where I was for about 16 months, I didn't see any difference among the people. They were all together and doing whatever they needed to do together. So, in terms of discrimination among the people of that country, I didn't see it.
When you came back here after being overseas and being exposed to a wider world in the Army, did it hit home to you even more that things weren't right here, and the I guess the separate but equal just wasn't, it wasn't right? Because you came back and there was still probably no coloreds allowed in Kings.
Oh yeah, yeah. And really, when I came back, the separate water fountains were still in existence, and restaurants and theaters. I mean, all that was still in place when I came back from Korea.
So tell me how you felt from, you were in an army, that you were all treated the same. Everyone was meshed together. Hypothetically, that's what it was supposed to be. And then you step out of the army back here into the same situation of where you'd grown up, that discrimination was so blatant.
I think maybe that was a part of what caused me to begin, at least, to think about the fact that, this isn't right. I've seen a different situation. This is what I left. Now I'm back in the same way. Began to think about you want to do something about this. You come up on two water fountains. Why do I have to do this? I've been in the military and everything, and then I come back into a situation like this. So I think that helped me in terms of developing the need to want to help change it.
When you came back, you and Jerry were married, I
Yes.
guess. Did you have a child by then?
Yeah, we had two daughters. When I came back from Korea. No, when I came back from Korea, it was just Ronnie.
You
Yeah.
came back from Korea, we had two children. Yeah, Ronnie and Nikki.
Yeah, okay. So we had two very small daughters at that point in time.
This goes into, I'm going to ask you a personal question. So you may not want to answer it, but when you come back, what type of conversations did you and Jerry have when you've come back and it really stands out to you that this is wrong? I mean, what type of conversations did you have between the two of you? Did you have those kind of conversations that you sit down and talk that we need to try to make a difference?
I think to some degree we did. May not have been a daily conversation, but at a point I began to teach in that situation I was telling you about with the superintendent who came up and blew his horn and the principal ran out to the car. And we would always talk about those kinds of situations and why would, this black principal believe that he had to, regardless of the weather, he had to go out because the superintendent blew his horn and, so all of that, I think, we talked about it, at home. We were carpooling because we were going traveling at 25 miles every day. And we would have discussions in the car about that situation with the superintendent and why it had to be, and and something ought to be done about it.
Were you angry?
I really was angry when I was angry from the first time that I saw it happen. But I got angrier when I saw it continue to happen. I said, well, first time maybe there was some special reason why he went out there. But then I discovered that every morning, he'd blow his horn, and he's going out to the car. And so that wasn't a special situation. I want you to come out here when you hear this horn. And it obviously was because the superintendent, in my opinion at least, was white. The principal was black. So I'm not going to get out of my car and come into your school. You're going to come out here to my car. And I think all of that, I think, was beginning to build up in me. And Jerry, of course, witnessed a lot of it. And we did begin to talk, I think, more about the situation and trying to decide, should we really try to do something about this? Should we really become involved in trying to make some changes? We've got 2 daughters who are growing up. They started school, and of course they had to go to a segregated school system. And I think all of those pieces, when you sit down and talk about them and they begin to fit together, then you begin to think and begin to try to decide what can be done, what should we do. So ultimately you reach a point where you decide something has to be done. And you try to become a part of whatever other people, like the NAACP as an example, which was active at that time, what they're trying to do, and we ought to be a part of what they're trying to do.
Were you angry at all white people then, or could you, just like Jerry and I were kidding, well, we don't kid, women think men don't listen. And it's a blanket thing. But I think that probably when we do think about it a little bit, well, we know it's not all men like that. So we'll just blanket the situation. Did you blanket all whites, or did you focus on, it was the ones in power, there was a certain agenda there so that they would stay in power?
I think your last comment really is what it was in terms of how I looked at it. I can recall that at that time, Petersburg General Hospital, Southside Regional, did not have any black members on the board. And I made an effort to try to find out why, and was invited to one of their meetings, and I attended for a short period of time, and I, said to them what I thought ought to be. So not too long after that, they had a vacancy, and they asked the mayor to appoint the individual. And of course, there were other situations still in effect. City council was all white at that point. And we had real difficulty getting them to make decisions that were citywide decisions. They would take care of the little pieces they wanted to take care of. And you could go to a council meeting and you talk all night and they'd sit there and listen, but they wouldn't do anything. So the people in power did what they wanted to do. And I'm sure it's because they didn't believe that you could do anything about it.
We're moving now to parallel before you were elected to council and fired from your position. parallel how that what you saw with the civil rights movement nationwide and what was happening here in Petersburg, which would have been late 50s starting into the early 60s?
I really think that Petersburg was one of the main forces, if you will, in terms of the start and what began to happen as far as the civil rights struggle was concerned. Martin Luther King, of course, came about as a result of Rosa Parks and the bus situation with her. But we had Y.T. Walker here as a pastor at Guilford Baptist Church. And he was an individual who wanted to cause something to happen to make some changes. And of course, ultimately, he and another smaller group attempted to use the library, and that, of course, set off some things. And he was able to organize the Petersburg Improvement Association, which really was the catalyst for really organizing and causing people to become very, very concerned and wanting to do something. All of the churches began to become involved. And all of that began to build to the point where, as far as Petersburg was concerned, the civil rights struggle became, to some degree, a national issue, really. And I think that Petersburg really was a major factor in the struggle.
Give me more particular examples of how Petersburg was major.
Martin Luther King came to Petersburg on a number of occasions and, of course, spoke here. Ultimately, he invited Y.T. Walker to come with him because I think he felt that he was an individual who could get some things done. So, and there were some other persons who were working with us in the Pittsburgh Improvement Association and working with Y.T., who also left to go to some phase of Martin Luther King's Southern Christian Leadership program. And I think all of that took place because it was obvious that Petersburg...
I'm trying to ascertain that time period from when you were elected to city council to when schools were totally integrated, that when you started out on council, that it was a pretty positive atmosphere, working with, you being the only black on city council, working with the other white members. But then it gradually got, when there started to be the conflict, not only the ward system, but the integration of the schools and white flight.
When I was first elected now, we had two blacks because Joe Owens was still there. He was not there after 68. I think the white flight began basically as a result of annexation. And when that started happening, of course, obviously the population changed. The school system population began to change. The integration of the school system took place about the same time. Petersburg High School and Peabody were merged. I think it was about 1970.
1970.
It was 1970 when the two high schools were merged. And that, of course, I think added to the white flight. The situation in terms of the elementary schools, of course, as I've indicated, I don't think was affected as much. You know, the high school situation was just one where you've got a significantly larger number of students, and there just were some attitudes in that kind of setting that people didn't want to deal with. You know?
You had 3 daughters.
Mm-hmm.
Did they mind going to a mixed school?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Our oldest daughter was at Petersburg High School prior to the merger. Now, she went through some things, went through some attitudes being expressed by Peabody students, really. She was a cheerleader. And, of course, Petersburg High and Peabody began to play football and what have you together. I mean, as opposing teams. This is prior to the merger. And she was the only black member of the cheering squad. So, of course, when, you know, the Peabody students saw her, then she had turned on them. You know, she's going over here with the whites and, you know, left us over here and didn't want to be a part of us, kind of thing. Which, of course, was not true at all, because we were just trying to help the whole process. And she worked well in that situation. I mean, she didn't do anything that would say that she was angry about having gone in that situation, or she began to make some friends. So then, of course, after that, it was, you know, the merger took place in 1970, and the whole environment, of course, obviously began to change.
How did you handle it as a family, though, that she would come home and she'd sort of be caught in the middle, because, you know, there were still whites that didn't want blacks in the school, and then you have blacks that thought she had turned on them. How did you handle that?
Well, I think we talked to her, you know, and after school we would have some dinner table conversation and just, I guess, try to find the best way we could, try to find out if she was having any problems, and if so, what were they, and if we discovered something that might have been leading in that direction, we tried to head it off, you know. Ed Betts was the principal at Petersburg High School at the time, and I think he tried to do what he could to keep everything in order. We might met with him a couple of times, but I think it was just a matter of conversation with our daughter, and of course the other 2 daughters. You know, I mean, all of us were there, so they obviously heard what was going on and whatever she had to say about the situation. And I think by having those kinds of discussions and open discussions and making suggestions if we needed to in terms of handling a given situation at the high school. But really, as far as Veronica was concerned, when she was the only black, the situation really was rather harmonious, I would say, because she seemed to have gotten along well with her teachers. We didn't find that there was any significant problem in terms of how the teachers were responding to her. So unless something happened with, the one of these athletic contests and Peabody students sort of started jumping her kind of thing verbally. Other than that, I think the number of incidents that she had really were relatively small in number.
What was the good about forced integration, and what was the bad about it?
I think I would have to say that the good really was that you were able to begin a process where the students ultimately began to find that everybody's the same and began to really work together. From an athletic point of view, some of the black boys began to play football and what have you, and that helped, I think. But in terms of the good coming out of the integration, I think that the mixing of the two schools brought about what I would think would be situations where, to some degree, although you wouldn't think that this might have happened at that point in time when year-wise, but I think that the students were exposed to some experiences that they had not had before and probably would not have had. And the Peabody students, when the merger took place, the Peabody students didn't want to go. They really didn't. And I had the opportunity with Elmo Rainey at that time to meet with a number of the students on several occasions and talk to them about the change and talk to them about what could happen, what good could happen by meeting with other people, if you will. I guess the negative side of it is simply that there was, when the merger took place, there was some conflict. There were some students, of course, I think from both sides, who didn't want it to happen. And I think to a degree they were doing what they could do to maybe cause it not to work. But even then, from what I saw, the teachers, I think at both schools, but at the higher level at Petersburg High School, I think those teachers worked well with trying to cause the situation to be a good one, worked well with the students in terms of causing them to be exposed to whatever needed to be. There was some, mixing of faculties too. So you had white teachers who went to Peabody along with some white students, and Same thing on the high school side. I'm not aware, and Jerry was at Peabody at the time, but I'm not aware of any major situations that took place as a result of the teachers being mixed. I think they began to mix well, if you will, and the educational side of it, I think, began to fit in and build, if you will, to the extent that the teachers were able to work with all of the students.
Talk a little bit during this period, right before integration, of what was happening here in Petersburg, I guess from the mid-60s when you were on council to when integration happened in 1970, of how Petersburg, the civil rights movement was moving forward in Petersburg as compared throughout the rest of the country.
When the two schools were merged, when the two high schools were merged and the other elementary schools were beginning to change to some degree, the civil rights struggle, if you will, that era really had begun to fade. I mean, the activity. I mean, we didn't have picket lines, and we didn't have people sitting in at lunch counters. We were more into trying to get people jobs and bringing about some changes along that line. So the major issue, if you will, at the 1970 forward really was the high school situation. So we didn't have any problem to the degree of the active civil rights struggle, other than trying to continue to work with what we were already doing. But as I said, I think the major situation then really was employment.
But during, maybe we need to back up a little bit more because I want you to talk about the parallel of before integration, though, and what was happening here from when there was integration between the period when the library, the arrests there and the picketing started from the library situation to the point when schools were integrated. The atmosphere in Petersburg and how you saw that changed based on the civil rights movement. As opposed to, I remember as a child, you see on TV the marches and everybody being sprayed with water and all the arrests and the beatings and so forth. Was that happening here? To any extent?
Not the physical part of it. I mean, what we saw, say what happened to the people who did the march across the Selma Bridge or were trying to do other kinds of physical things.
Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Before we start rolling, you mentioned about, I think we were talking about the most difficult period of time was the trying to have the ward system accepted. Overall, though, and when you talked about the civil rights movement did accomplish what it set out to accomplish at that time. But certainly from after integration through now, there has still been a racial divide in this city. And I think that's probably reflects somewhat throughout the country. It could be more here or less here, but on issues, and we even see it on council today, that there is a racial divide. What do we need to do that to move forward as one? I mean, I don't have the answer. I'm trying to. I don't understand it.
This, unfortunately, I think, is an age-old problem because we spend more time discussing issues related to each individual on the council than we do in terms of discussing issues in reference to the growth of the city. And I would agree that I think that there are council situations and people on the council who don't want certain things to happen. And I think that the racial divide, if you will, is there. And until such time as you're able to really address municipal issues, I don't think we're going to be able to move like we ought to move as fast as we need to move. And I don't mean just do something overnight, but in some way we I think have to cause the people on the council to come together, if you will, and work on some projects that will cause the city to do what needs to be done to move it forward, to attract desirable businesses. And we have some land that could be used for light industry. And that's the kind of thing that I think has got to happen if we plan to cause the city to become one that is really going to attract more business and people. Some, as I indicated, some new businesses have come in. But I think there's much more that can be done.
Looking back, what are you most proud of in moving the civil rights movement forward and the betterment of Petersburg? That you're proud that you had a hand in making that happen.
I think that to a great degree, in my opinion at least, the Redevelopment Housing Authority, I think, has come about as a result of people working together at that point in time to eliminate housing that people never should have been living in. Okay? And I think without the civil rights movement, I don't think we would have stopped, so to speak, and had taken a look at what needed to be done in places like the Gilfield area and some of the buildings that have come up as a result of that. I think to a degree we have changed, maybe not much, but I think we've changed the environment or the atmosphere to the degree that some people are coming back to Petersburg. Some businesses that would not possibly have come are coming or are now here. And I think it's a result of to a degree, people being able to work in such a way to work together to get those kinds of things to happen. I think we have a long ways to go in terms of the working together of all of the citizens, or majority of the citizens, to cause Petersburg to recognize really the fact that there's still much to be done in terms of bringing people together. Excuse me. And using that, if you will, to cause more businesses to come into the city. It's difficult at this point, I think, to pinpoint one situation, let's say, that came about as a result of the civil rights era that has caused significant progress in the city. We just need to I think take advantage of some of what we have and what looks like some of what may be coming. And I would hope that as a result of the fact that now you don't have at least blatant racism. It's kind of subtle, but it's there. But getting people to work together so that we can take advantage, as I said, of what we have and turn it into a city that will grow people-wise as well as business-wise, to cause Petersburg to be a city that we really will be proud of. If LISC is able to do what they want to do in reference to the Halifax Street, Triangle, South Avenue area, and not only from a business perspective, but maybe some housing, that would be a significant growth factor, I think. Okay. But just thinking about what was in 1963, 64 in terms of whether or not I could go into Rucker Rosenstock's tea room or sit down at the lunch counter or go to the Bluebird Theater, which theaters aren't even there anymore, anywhere. That obviously has changed, but we've lost, I think, all of what could have been if we had, and I don't know what we should have done at that point, but if we had done whatever we needed to do at that time to take advantage of providing for Sycamore Street to be what I think it could have been if we could have held on to some of the businesses, if we could have, and this may happen, if we could have caused more housing, particularly second level housing, and bring some people into that area, I think we would be ahead of the game.
Why is racism still? There has been a great deal accomplished since the civil rights movement, and you hit on that it was blatant racism
Mhm.
then. The underlying racism is there now.
Mhm.
Why is it still there? And to what degree?
I think it's there to a great degree, really, in relationship to the fact that it's hidden. It's there, and I think every once in a while it raises its head. In terms of why it's there, I think we still have many people who really don't want Petersburg to grow too much because it will take away from their ability to make money. There is, I think, an obvious effort to stop certain growth in this city. I really do. Recognize that the southern end of the city is and probably will continue to grow to a degree. But I think we're forgetting the inner city. And I think until we do something about that and bring a good mix of people, I think that underlying racism factor is still going to be there. And we've got to do some things that will cause the city to grow in such a way that there won't be room for that.
Is it as much black and white racism, or is it economic racism?
I think it's more economic racism than black and white. However, I think unfortunately there is still black and white racism. Now, the economic side of it may tend to lessen if we can get that up to a point where there are more jobs, more reasonably paid jobs, and do away with some of the blight that we have that exists. I think we've got to do that. I sit on the planning commission now, and it'll be very, very soon that we will begin to work on a new comprehensive plan. We've already gotten consultants to begin to take a look at it. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to develop a plan that will point the city in certain directions. We won't be able to dictate to people that you do this, that, or the other, but at least we would have a plan that says this section of the city should be this, and over here should be this. And if we can get that done, I really think that we'll move.
Anything that I haven't asked you that I've missed? And I know it will be. I won't think about it some before I come back to do Jerry. But overall, is there anything that we haven't touched on?
I can't think of anything really at this point that we haven't touched on. If I do, I'll let you know.
All right. Well, I'll go back to